Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and today what I want to talk about is Gatsby, because I have been doing some requests for like what people would like to see videos on and things like that. And again, if you want to make your own sort of like suggestions or recommendations, join the Discord or Slack community over there at devnursery.com and just message me, and I'm more than glad to try things out. So I've done videos on Gatsby before, but they're always very like shallow, sort of like just the basics, and this video is probably going to be kind of that too, but it's be part of a series where I'll go even deeper into Gatsby. And then plus Gatsby's changed a lot since the last time I played with it. I have been working on with one client with Gatsby, but it's still using like an older version of Gatsby, so it's time to try out to see how far Gatsby has come. But just to kind of understand like why there are frameworks like Gatsby and Next in the React world, or Elder.js in the Svelte world, or Gridsum in the Vue world, or Scully in the Angular world. These are general all site generators. I'm going to say site generator. I'm not going to say static site generator, because most of these have gotten a bit more advanced than just static site generation. Now, why would you want a site generator? Well, because like what Angular, React, Vue, Svelte offer you out of the box is limited, in the sense that it's very focused on providing you a quality client-side rendered single-page application. So the way they generally all work is you have like an HTML file that has like a single div, and then you mount a component called app to that div. You don't have to do it that way, but that's typically like you're generally going to use the default build, and the build is generally always configured that way, and you know, that's just the way it is. And a couple problems with that. One, and these aren't necessarily problems that are as much problems as they used to be. But one, search engines. Search engines, what they usually do is look at your HTML and read the text in your HTML to figure out sort of like what's your website about and whatnot. So if your HTML file is empty because your whole website's rendered by JavaScript, and the web scrapers were at least early on, I think they're more sophisticated now, weren't sophisticated enough to sit there and like look at the site as its rendered state changes and try to categorize all that and scrape all that to crawl your website. You lost out on like, you know, search engine visibility using a lot of these frameworks. The benefit was you got this huge amount of speed, because basically instead of every page requiring a separate request to a server, you downloaded sort of the whole application up front. Your whole website was just bundled in this one single page application. Now you might use something like client-side routing to kind of give the effect of multiple pages, but it really was just one page that would render different things based on sort of JavaScript events. And again, so that means you would just load up the page, and then you would never have to load up anything again. Everything just kind of works and it's fast. And that's all well and good. But you know, what happens if the client's particular client's computer is slow? Well, then that's going to affect their experience. So what happens, you're offloading a lot on the client, and if the client has a normal speed computer, like their experience will be improved. But if they don't, like there's variables that you can't control when you put it all on the client, because you can't control what's going on that user's computer, like what browser they're using, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the benefit of having sites that are statically rendered via HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, or server-side rendered, is that one, you're going to have the HTML up front. So basically, in this case, what we mean is these are pre-rendered websites. So either the server renders it before it responds to the request, which the downside of that is your server's doing a lot more work because it has to rebuild the website every time someone requests the website. Or statically rendered, where you basically maybe you do it on a schedule, like maybe once a week you build the website, and it just generates all the pages. But either way, the user's downloading sort of the already rendered HTML, the already rendered experience. In that case, there's less work being done on the client, but better for search engine optimization, better for security, because all those little vectors of what's being rendered in the client, because you know, dev tools inside browsers are so sophisticated, they can manipulate what's going on the front end, and you know, get access to things because you are doing those things on the front end, instead of just kind of keeping all your logic on the back end and just giving users sort of like that front plate. So basically what old is new again. So we're kind of going back. So we went from, because we were doing server-side rendering before, like we were using things like PHP and whatnot to do server-side rendering, and they still do. And then we went to client-side rendering. We're using like React, Angular, because it was just kind of one. It was just nice. It was fast. But then all these other issues kind of came up. So now people are building these generators because they really do still like using Angular, React, Svelte, and Vue. And these generator layers, they let you write your code in your framework of choice, but then you run the generator, it reads the code, and on the other end spits out a much more complicated or less complicated application. This is why when you see like the Gatsby website, the word static is crossed out, because once upon a time, it was just a static generator. It would just read your React code and spit out just plain HTML, CSS pages that represented what you created in your React code. And again, faster, all that stuff. But the problem is, like, if it's just pure static, like, what about interactive elements of your website, like being able to log in and things like this? So it became like there was a need to have some level of the ability to do some client-side rendering, some some server-side rendering. So now these frameworks have gotten, and then Next.js basically kind of demonstrated that you could kind of have everything in one basket. So now Gatsby's kind of moved in that direction too, giving you more sort of features to do more varieties of types of rendering. Okay, so these have really become sort of full-on frameworks to create on full websites of all sorts that kind of give you these generation features to kind of benefit like SEO, security, things like that, but you still get all the really cool benefits and syntactical benefits of using something like React. In Vue, there's the same thing. There's Gridsome and Nux. In Svelte, there's Elder.js, Jungle.js, SvelteKit, Plenty, and then in Angular, it's just Scully, because Angular already kind of does have a lot of features built in to do a lot of these things. Scully just kind of adds the static generation. I'm not as familiar with the Angularverse to say if there's anything else beyond that. Okay, but now that we kind of know like sort of like what the role of Gatsby is. It's that generator layer. Okay, in the same way Next is a generator layer. And then again, you can actually use all the frameworks in a new generator called Astro, which is awesome. I love Astro. Okay, but there's this generator layer. So you write your code in your framework of choice. It goes to run through the generator, and you have a site on the other side. Okay, that's essentially the idea here. But this means certain patterns have to be done differently. Each of them have their own way of working with, like, interacting with data. Because again, there's the generator layer that generates a website. But in that case, the data layer gets more complicated. Because in a plain like React application, your data layer would just be your API or other APIs, and you would just make fetch requests to all these different sources of data when your website's loaded in the user's browser. But generally here, we are generating that page before the user sees it, so we need to go pull that data. And how do we coordinate all that is different. And Gatsby does it in a very sort of interesting way where you configure all your data sources, and what it does, it creates one giant GraphQL API that you can pull data from. And it knows that, hey, if you pull data via the GraphQL API that it generates, okay, that data has to be pulled before the user ever goes to the website. It has to be pulled at build time. So it'll pull the data at build time and then just hardwire that into your pages. So you're not pulling that data when people go to your website. The data's already been pulled, and what's on your website is what you got from that pull. Okay, and that's different. And then you could separately do like more now you could probably do some more client-side rendery things. But when you use the GraphQL API, you're saying, hey, this is stuff I want to get at build time. Okay, so let's actually now like look at code. Okay, so nowadays, so this is a lot easier than it used to be. So npm init Gatsby. Okay, so let's create a new Gatsby project. So let's see how this goes. npm init Gatsby. Okay, so we'll just call it my Gatsby site, and that's fine. Would you like to name the folder your site will be created? That's fine. Okay, arrow keys. What's the question though? What you will be using as a CMS. So this is assuming that you're using some existing CMS, like a WordPress or a Contentful or a Sanity. And I guess I'm assuming that what it'll do is it'll just kind of configure it for you. I'm going to say no. I'm going to add it later so we can kind of talk about how you would do that. Install a styling system. So if you like any of these ways of styling, that's fine. We'll just use plain CSS. Okay, let's see here. Would you like to install additional features with other plugins? Build and host for free on Gatsby Cloud. Add responsive images. Okay, this is kind of cool. Chances are you probably are going to always want to add the responsive images. This is like, if I remember right, it's a plugin called Gatsby Image Sharp. And basically what it does is just that it's going to like basically add build time, render multiple versions of your images depending on for different screen sizes. So that way you're always kind of delivering the website with sort of like the fastest loading images. So that's not a bad thing to have. You're definitely going to want React Helmet. For SEO purposes, what React Helmet does is that it allows you to manipulate the head tag in the HTML. So that way you can actually specify like SEO meta tags and things like that. So we're going to want that. Add an automatic sitemap. That's good for SEO purposes. So we should probably add that. Generate a manifest file. A manifest file is if you're going to be doing like a progressive web app. The manifest file has like all the metadata the browser needs to generate like service workers and know where your favicon is and all these kind of things to be able to allow your site to work offline. Okay, and then generally like if you make a website that passes all the checks for like a progressive web app, generally you can actually even sometimes offer those up in mobile app stores. Okay, you can actually, instead of having to make a separate mobile app, the website becomes your mobile app. It's a really interesting topic. I'm not going to add the manifest file because I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. Add Markdown support without MDX. Add Markdown with MDX support. Off the top of my head, if I remember right, I think MDX is just like Markdown extended, so it has like extra things you can do with Markdown. Why not? So that's nice that it adds. You can now add this out of the box before you have to configure it, and it was a pain. So this is going to allow us just to use the Markdown files for content, which is awesome. So add Markdown and MDX support. So I'm going to hit enter on that. And now basically Gatsby has its own like service for hosting Gatsby websites, kind of like Netlify. But it's tailored to Gatsby, so it can really take advantage of Gatsby's features better than pretty much any platform, kind of like how Vercel is really built for like Next.js. It's a smart business model to create like a hosting platform for your framework, so that way you actually make money on the framework and building it, but two, you can add features because you have a platform that facilitates those features. So that's pretty cool. I'm not going to use it. We're not going to worry about deployment right now, so I'm going to leave it at that. So done. Okay, so here's what we'll do now. Create a new Gatsby site in the folder My Gatsby Site. Install Gatsby plugin image, Gatsby plugin React Helmet, plugin sitemap. That all looks good to me. So yes, do it. Okay, so it's doing the thing. So I like this. I like this new generator. You know how it's walking you through like setting up and installing a lot of these basic plugins. Before, like, this is just stuff you'd have to set up every time, or you have to use templates. But then like other people's templates would always have like extra stuff that maybe you didn't want. And so you're constantly having to do like configuration. So this is nice. I like this, like, because those are like definitely the things you're almost going to always use, and you're not having to do that setup for the same things that you're always going to use. But because it's a generator from Gatsby, it's always using like the most recent version of Gatsby and the most recent version of these libraries. Like this, like having created like that Merced spin-up tool to generate projects, I'm starting to run into that. Like maintaining like 40 templates becomes kind of tedious, having to like update them and maintain them and whatnot. But c'est la vie. Okay, so this is generating the project. So let's take a look at what we got so far. So this is kind of like what a Gatsby project looks like. There's going to be more files that pop up in a bit, but let's kind of take a look. Package.json. Okay, so here we have our different commands. Now, technically, you could install Gatsby globally, and then you get this like Gatsby command, and you can just do Gatsby develop, Gatsby build. I do have Gatsby installed globally. Okay, I'm just letting it install all the things. Okay, and cool. So that's everything that's installed. Now notice this is Gatsby Config, and I noticed like a lot of these other files that used to be there aren't there anymore. Interesting. But basically you have this Gatsby Config, and this is kind of the heart of what Gatsby does. So basically this is like site metadata. This is something that you'll always be able to kind of like grab if you want to use it. So you can just basically think of this just as like a block of object where you can just stick any data you'd want to make available to your whole website in. Plugins, these are an array of all the plugins you have set up. So as you can see, what it does is that when it builds, it's going to run through these plugins, I think in this order. So the order does matter a little bit in case some of them depend on another one having, or assuming another one has ran. But again, this is Gatsby plugin image, React helmet, sitemap, MDX, plugin sharp. Again, all these things with the word sharp have to do with images. Now, some plugins require you to configure it. So what you do is you end up setting up an object instead that says, okay, hey, this is the plugin, and all these plugins are libraries. Okay, so if you go to the package.json, you can see that these are all installed there. So really, what's happening here is you're just putting in the name of the plugin, the library. So that way it knows where to look for it in node modules. But if it needs other features, so you're saying resolve, so it means resolve, go look in node modules folder for that thing, and then you can pass any options that particular plugin needs. Okay, so you just read the documentation for that particular plugin to see what other options you can pass in. But basically this one here, source file system, is just saying, hey, this folder called images is intended to have images in it. So it's actually going to use this Gatsby source file system plugin. And what this plugin does is that it takes like a folder and you can label it and make it its like own node. And I'll show you what I mean by node when we get to the GraphQL piece. But basically it says, okay, this particular folder here, you can query as if it were data. So really, so you can query all your images if you need images on a particular page. And this is pages, so I guess we can query pages as well. Okay, so that's all set up. Now usually there's two other files here. I don't know if you have to add them manually nowadays or they just aren't necessary anymore, but there used to be like a Gatsby node file that was for creating more nodes. So usually what you would do is, like, if you had other data you wanted to pull in, you would manually create nodes using this node API. So basically you'd sit there and say, okay, I'm pulling data from this API, take this piece of data from the API, generate a node. Take this piece of API, all these nodes all together are under this label, and that would add it to the GraphQL layer. But I'm not seeing that, unless I moved it somewhere else. Okay, so I see here we have our pages, and typically the way this works, this uses file-based routing. So that means if you ever use Next.js, you're probably familiar with file-based routing in the sense that your main page is index.js. So just imagine like how you would do it with HTML files. So the main page would be index.html, and basically if I were to create a folder and say, like, let's me create a folder. So I'll create a folder. Let's say I called it cheese, and then I created a file called hello.js in there, and then I wrote a React component in there. So if I write a React, just say, and let me just, I think I have to export it. Let me just double check here. This is all been a while. Okay, so that's index page, so that's the component, but is it exported? It's index page. Yes, you do export the component. Okay, so export default function. Now let's just return an h1. Hello world. Okay, so that's the whole page. Okay, so now if I run npm run develop. Yep, doesn't like that. Why? Oh, because I'm not in the folder. So cd my Gatsby site npm run develop. So now it's starting up Gatsby. Oh, didn't like that either. Yeah. Oh, I'm still in the old version. Okay, because yeah, nvm use systems. Okay. And the only reason I have the older version of Node is because I'm working on that project with the older version of Gatsby. Fun times. NVM use system. I already did that. npm run develop to run the develop server. Then we'll watch like Gatsby do things. So what it's doing is now running through. Now again, when you're in develop mode, you're not actually statically rendering the website. Now you actually are doing like normal React kind of client-y side rendering. They might have worked on this more. Okay, so they are using sort of like an older version of React then, because that means React has to be in scope. So that's something they kind of they changed in React and React 17. But basically import, that means I have to do this, import React from React. Okay, so cool, that fixes that. Warnings I don't care about right now. Please add a name to your function, for example. Fine, we'll give a name to the function. So they want me to just do this. Cheese hello. Okay, the name of the function doesn't particularly matter. Okay. Okay, now it's happy. But basically what it's doing, it's kind of mock rendering the site. So the reason I mention that is because sometimes you do client-side rendered logic in your components here, and it works when you're in development mode, but it doesn't work after you build the website. And the reason for that is that when you build the website, it's trying to render it statically, and client-side rendered, like making API requests right in your code, it doesn't play very well with that, or trying to do like use effects or things like that. So there are different ways of like achieving a lot of these things. Okie dokie. Now let's see here. What was I doing? I want to go to the website. Okay. So that's on what localhost. Scrolling up to just see where does this thing run. I want to say it's localhost 8000, but give me okay, I'm pretty sure it's localhost 8000, so I'll just do that first. Localhost 8000. Yep, there we go. And now see, that's the index page, because see, we're looking at source pages index.js. Now again, I created a folder called cheese, and in there is a file called hello. So now when I go here, that should be where that file is, and see hello world. Okay, so the URL for the page is going to be very based on the name of the file. So what folder is the file in? What's the name of the file? They're just JavaScript files or TypeScript files. You can use TypeScript. But the naming convention determines what the route is. So you don't actually have to explicitly make routes, kind of like you would do with React Router. It's just all in the name. Okay, cool. Now the other cool thing is this. Okay. Now this is like what's called Graphql. Okay, now Graphql is a tool for exploring GraphQL APIs. I always preferred GraphQL Playground, but this is built into Gatsby, so this works. And the way this works is that these are all the nodes that are currently configured with your Gatsby application. And these are data that you can pull into any particular page. So what you can do here is try to figure out what data you want. So let's pretend that I want all the images. So let's do that. So I want all the images. So all these purple ones tend to be like filters, ways to filter the data. Okay, and the blue ones tends to be the actual like data. So let's say I want the sum. Well, I don't really want that. Let's just say I want the total count of all images, and I want, you just kind of have to play around with this and kind of figure out what data you want. I'm looking for like, I'm gonna get a URL, page info, node, group, edges. And if you're not familiar with like graph database terminology, a node is a piece of data. Okay, a node says like one image would be a node, and then the edges are the relationships that node has to another piece of information. So when I see edges, that's telling me that this is pointing to something else. So this is a relationship that a particular image has with maybe something else. So I always find the way that Gatsby organizes these and creates these nodes a little bit confusing. So you just kind of play around. But the idea is that you kind of generate the query using this, and then you hit play, and then you see what data it gets you, because this is the data it would give your website. So this is not really data I want, so I maybe won't use that. Then I may go over here, and just keep. Let's start working on a new query. Okay, so I'll delete all that. Let's try this one, image sharp. See, maybe this one will let me get individual pictures. Okay, internal. Which, I mean, I don't think there is any pictures in there. So, fixed. Fluid, Gatsby image data. Let's see here, sizes, quality. Oh, these are filters. Again, purple's filters. I don't want filters, I just want the data. Okay, ID, parent. Okay, fix, base 64, source. Source, let's take a look at that. And now let's put play. Okay, now we're starting to talk. So there I got the source, so that I can use that. So these are the images, so this is like the ID of the image, and then here's like the source. Good. So if I had multiple images in that image folder, here would kind of give me what I want, because really and actually I don't even really, well, I might want the ID, but I can then basically generate the data that I want here, and then I would copy this query, just so you can kind of see, onto whatever page I wanted to use it. So like, for example, in the index page, let me just see if they have an example here. Well, not in there, but let's do it over here. So what you would do is you would have to import, and then come back to that, from Gatsby. We'd have to import, I think, GraphQL. And if I remember correctly, again, been a while, you would do like an export default, export GraphQL. And this is a tagged template literal. Okay, and then we actually have to call this something. So const query equals, and then we would paste the query in here. So I'm saying I'm exporting this query, and it doesn't like it. So let's find out why. Okay, expected name, found string data, build failed, GraphQL syntax error in query. So tell me where. Expected name. Oh, I think that they like add like a name for the query. Let's see here. Do they have an example of one? Okay, let's consult the documentation. Take the tutorial. Okay, query data with GraphQL. I just want to see the example. I get all this. This is an example module that exports. Gatsby Config, that's fine. Use static query. So here we go. So use static query. GraphQL. Okay, so pass it to the query and be sure to use. Okay, so basically there's now a hook we use. Okay. Now let's see how this would work. So const layout. Oh, you use the hook inside the thing now. That's cool. Before you had to like export it at the bottom. Okay, things have changed quite a bit. I like this way. This makes a lot more sense. Okay, so let's go do that. So the way this would work, let's go back over here to hello.js. I also have to import use static query. Okay. So then we would say const data equals use static query, and then I would just copy this piece down into there. Control X. Okay. Let's see if it likes that. Still doesn't like it. Let's just go back up here to the example of the string data, use static query, GraphQL. Yeah, I should start with the word query. Where does it start with the word data? Let's go over here. Yeah, that's not even what it says there. Okay, so I didn't. Oh, because I copied the results. That's why. This is the query. I want to copy that. Okay. Okay, so then we'll recopy this, because again, you want the result. You want the query, not the results. And see, now that works. Cool. So now we have this data. Let me see if I can console log the data while I'm in this development mode so you can see it. Console.log data. Okay. And let's just do localhost 8000 / g/hello. Okay. And let's see here, console. And then here's the object. And see, we get some data. We get the result. We get those results that we saw before. Okay, so that's all it is. You go through GraphQL, you find where the data you want is, which can be a lot less fun than you'd think. Okay, because again, sometimes this can it just gives you a lot of options. And again, it's not because GraphQL makes things this complicated. Like, if you go through one of my tutorials where you can create a GraphQL API from scratch, it gets as complicated as you want. But the idea is that these plugins are there to give you as much flexibility as possible for you to be able to access the data you need. So there's a lot of different, again, but just think purple for filters, blue for actual like data points. Okay. So again, these are all data points, but again, if a data point actually has more data points inside of it, it'll like break it down. So this can just kind of go on forever. Okay. But then you play it, and once you get the results that you want here, you're going to copy the query you want here, and then you're just going to use this hook in your component, so that way you save it into this like data property. And then it knows anywhere where this data is used, it's going to be statically rendered. So that's rendered at build time. Okay, so since now that you actually designate it as a static query, I'm going to assume that there's also like ways to actually do like a not static query, which makes me wonder. Like, let's take a look. Is there another hook? Let's see. Does it create a new blog page? Create an MDX blog post? Is there another way to pull in the query that is not statically rendered? Use a page query to pull the list of post file names into your blog page. Got that. Blog page. Okay, I'm gonna have to read all that more in depth at some point, but you guys get the idea. So that's the idea of working with Gatsby. Okay, and then what you can do is you can generate pages using this, and you can create dynamic pages. So you can sit there and say something like, let's see here. You can create, like, I can create something in here that's like new file, name.js. So now this is going to be dynamic, okay? Meaning that this name part is kind of like a variable. It's called the URL param. So it's like cheese anything. So let's see here. Import React from React. Okay, and let's just do this function export default parami let's console.log props. So actually I need to define props, so let's define props here, and again just return an h1 hello world, because I think they deliver that param via the what doesn't it like? That coloring doesn't make me happy, is it? Props, console.log props. Let's see what it says. Oh, I don't need to name it if it's an export. Oh no, because it's I wrote it as an arrow. Okay, I forgot the function keyword. There we go. Now let's see here. Let's go to g/hello/ blah, 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 blah. Let's see, it gives me hello world, and see the props has all this. Okay, so I'm getting all this from props, and I can now pull the param. Okay, so I can create dynamic pages that might call an API from that param or something like that. So I can go here, and let me just see what the path is. Props.params.name. Okay, so I can just be like here, props.params.name, and see, and whatever I type here, this is a param. and you can create dynamic pages. And there's a bunch of other stuff in here. I'm sure that's pretty useful. That just probably requires like static query results. You know, all sorts of fun stuff to explore. Okay, but just so you can see like different ways you can access data. But yeah, you just generate your pages that way, and then when you're done, you just run build. Really what you can build is based on your imagination. I'm sure there's a lot more new features. Again, as I mentioned, this looks like now there's more room for like client-side rendering and server-side rendering. How you would do that, I still have to explore, so we'll do that in future videos. But hopefully this will give you a good introduction to like working with Gatsby in today's world, with all the sort of the new updates to Gatsby. And we'll kind of explore that even further going forward. Have a great day and enjoy. Make sure to join Dev Nursery's Slack and Discord channel. Follow me on YouTube, Twitter, all that fun stuff. I'll see you all next time.